Okay. All right. So the subject is hematology, advanced hematology. Okay. Since your masters and the subject code is 21 MSH 713. So let us go to the syllabus. So about the introduction to hematology. So we already know the properties, functions of blood, and to tell much. Then in the syllabus, in the first unit, you have all bleeding profiles. Okay. Bleeding disorders, coagulopathy, coagulation screenings, prothrombintum, activated partial thromboplastin, thrombintum, plasma, fibrinogen test, and leukemias, laboratory diagnosis of various types of leukemias. So this has been given in the unit 1. So in order to understand unit 1, you need to understand what is hemostasis, coagulation mechanism, and the role of platelets in the coagulation mechanism and clotting of blood. So that we will discuss. I think we already discussed this in the last class. So as I stated, there are 3 major branches of hematology. So we have basic hematology, transfusion medicine, and bleeding disorders. In the basic hematology, we will discuss about the basic properties of basic components of the blood. So what are the basic components or cellular components of blood? We have red blood cells, white blood cells, then white blood cell count, ESR, PCV, hemoglobin, platelet count, eosinophil count, hemoglobin content, bleeding time, clotting time. Sometimes we will do in the basic hematology, which is mainly focusing on the basic components of the blood. But basic hematology never discuss about the advanced areas in the blood. Okay. Then we have the second branch, which is the transfusion medicine. In the transfusion medicine, we will go for detection of antigens and antibodies within the blood. And also transfusion medicine is for checking the compatibility of donor's blood to the recipient blood. Okay, here we will usually do blood grouping, RH typing, donor screening, and blood screening will be usually done in this hematology via Coombs test, direct antiglobulin test, indirect antiglobulin, DAT, okay, direct antiglobulin, indirect antiglobulin test. With this, we will do in transfusion medicine. Whereas in the bleeding profile, whenever we are saying bleeding profile will discuss both about bleeding time, clotting time, and if still there is any prolonged bleeding time means, then it will see what is the problem with bleeding time. Is there any is the platelets defected? Is there any platelet dysfunction? If there is platelet dysfunction, what type of dysfunction is the platelet? Is the platelet unable to adhere? Is the platelet unable to secrete? Is the platelet unable to activate? So what is the problem with the platelets? That we will discuss in the bleeding time. Whereas in the clotting time, if the clotting time is increased, that indicates that there might be some deficiencies of any one of the 13 clotting factors. So deficiency of any clotting factor results in the increased clotting time. And we know that there are 2 pathways in order to clot the blood. So that one is intrinsic pathway, one is extrinsic pathway. Intrinsic pathway has many steps to make the prothrombin activator, whereas in the extrinsic pathway, it's a very 2 to 3 steps direct pathway to get the prothrombin activator. Upon getting prothrombin activator will convert fibrinogen to prothrombin to thrombin. Thrombin will convert fibrinogen to fibrin. So this is the story of bleeding disorders. Now we will try to see if clotting time increased, what is the reason for increased clotting time? Is the factors in intrinsic pathway deficient? Is the factors in extrinsic pathway deficient? Is the factors in the common pathway deficient? Or is there any other factors contributing to increased clotting time? Is there any hemophilia to the patient? Is there any other disorders contributing to this one? Okay, so all these bleeding problems will be addressed in the bleeding disorders, and this all test will be together given as a lab test called coagulation pathway or coagulation profile. In coagulation profile, we will discuss about individual attributes of these tests. We will go with detection of bleeding time, clotting time, then prothrombin time, activated partial thromboplastin time, then TGT, thrombin generation test, treated thrombin time. So all these individual tests we will perform in coagulation profiles. So now I will discuss individual coagulation profile test. Okay, so a brief overview. So we know that whenever there is a damage to the blood vessel, so damaged blood vessel will expose the collagen. So the collagen fibers has been exposed. Upon collagen fiber exposed, okay, now this endothelial cells will secrete high molecular weight kininogen. So this high molecular weight kininogen will be deposited on the exposed collagen. Upon this, now a roaming platelets will get attached to the collagen fibers. Okay, now platelets will do 3 important properties. One is attachment. After that, aggregation. The attached platelet will release certain cytokines. Now many platelets will get attached into this site. Upon aggregation, so many platelets came and they aggregated the blood.
upon aggregation, now they will form a temporary, they will temporarily stop the bleeding, and this is called primary plaque formation. After primary plaque formation, now these platelets get activated, and the activated platelets will start converting fibrinogen to fibrin. So fibrinogen is already present in the plasma. Now this fibrinogen will be converted to fibrin, then fibrin will make the blood clot. So this is the simplest explanation of blood clotting. Okay. So now how the fibrinogen has been converted to fibrin. What type of pathways does the platelets get initiated in order to clot the blood? Now we can see the coagulation pathway or clotting pathway. So whenever there is any defects with the platelets, then the bleeding time will increase. If there are any problems with the clotting factors, then we know that there are 13 clotting factors. So any deficiencies or any problem with the clotting factors will result in prolonged or increased clotting time. So increased bleeding time, we can understand that it is either due to problem with platelets or it is either problem with platelet functions. That functions include attachment problems, aggregation problems, or secretory problems, or even activation problems. These might be the some possible scenarios where there will be increased bleeding time. So bleeding time is always about platelets mediated, whereas clotting time is always discussed about the clotting factors problems. Okay, and these clotting factors will act. They will activate one and the other in two pathways, intrinsic and extrinsic pathway. So now we need to address whether clotting factor deficiency is in the intrinsic pathway, or is it in the extrinsic pathway, or is it in the common pathway. We need to pinpointly locate what type of in what pathway the clotting factor is deficient. So in order to pinpointly locate the reason of the problem, we will go with multiple lab tests. Okay, we will go with PT, Aptt, TT, TGT, clot retraction. All these tests will be performed in order to pinpoint the source of error, source of reason for getting prolonged clotting time. Okay, so yes, so this is the 13 clotting factors. So you must, by this, you must know this 13 clotting factors because you are master students. So the clotting factor 1 to 13 and 6th clotting factor is not there. In the beginning, we thought that there is a 6th clotting factor, but upon further studies, we came to know that the 6th clotting factor is just a derivative of 5th clotting factor. So there is no need of keeping a subset of a 5th clotting factor as a new entity. So but by that time, they already given numbers to each clotting factor according to the series of they discovered. Okay, so upon realizing that there is no 6th clotting factor, rather than rearranging the numbers of all clotting factors, they just nullified it. So 6th clotting factor is null. So there is no more 6th clotting factor, but they haven't altered the other sequence of the numbers. Okay, so that is why the 6th clotting factor is not visible in the 13 clotting factors. But we also included it as a thing in order to not to rearrange the other clotting factor numberings. Okay, so the common 13 clotting factors that we have include fibrinogen, prothrombin, tissue thromboplastin. 4th is calcium, 5th is stable, labile factor, 6th is not there, 7th is stable factor, 8th is anti-hemophilic factor, 9th is Christmas factor, 10th Stewart power factor, 11 plasma thromboplastin antecedent, 12 Hegman factor, and 13 fibrin stabilizing factor. Now I want to tell one important thing, that our high molecular weight kininogen. In the previous slide, here we seen that exposed collagens, endothelial cells will secrete a substance called high molecular weight kininogen. Okay, now this is called 1 Willebrand factor. Okay, this high molecular weight kininogen is called 1 Willebrand factor. This 1 Willebrand factor has a it fell in love actually. Okay, it fell in love with one clotting factor, and that clotting factor is clotting factor 8. Okay, so if there is no 1 Willebrand factor, without 1 Willebrand factor, our clotting factor 8 won't bind. Okay, clotting factor 8 will always bind with the 1 Willebrand factor. That is why your clotting factor 8 is called okay. I want to tell one more thing. Absence of 1 milligram factor results in a bleeding disorder called hemophilia. Absence of 1 milligram factor causes a bleeding condition called hemophilia. This hemophilia is closely related with clotting factor 8. Okay, clotting factor 8 will prevent hemophilia. Clotting factor 8 will bind to this 1 milligram factor and it will prevent such type of bleeding. That is why clotting factor 8 is named as anti-hemophilic factor. Clotting factor 8 will prevent hemophilia disease. Okay, that is why 8th clotting factor is called anti-hemophilic factor. Okay, eighth clotting factor is anti-hemophilic factor. So 9th is Christmas, 10th is Stuart power, 11th is plasma thromboplastin antecedent, 12th Hegman factor, and 13th fibrin stabilizing factor. Then coming to the intrinsic and extrinsic pathways. So in the intrinsic pathway, so I have given you a very shortcut approach of understanding this one. So in the last lecture, I made a blunder mistake and I want to rectify that mistake here. Let me take a eraser. I guess I cannot use eraser here. Let me take a highlighter then. Listen, students. So you first draw 12, okay, 12 to 1, okay, 12 to 1. So in the center, you keep 10 as center. Okay, try to memorize this sequence. Now after 12, we got 11. After 11, we should get 10. But in between 11 and 10, we have 9. In between 11 and 9, I kept 8. Then in between 9 and 10, I kept 5. Okay. Then from down, 7th clotting factor will directly activate the 10th clotting factor. And this results in 2, 1. Okay. Now, this is your extrinsic pathway. 7, 10, 2, 1 is extrinsic pathway, whereas 12, 11, 8, 5, 10, 2, 1 is the intrinsic pathway. The upper one is intrinsic pathway. Okay, you can see a gun shape here. Okay, so this gun shape is extrinsic and this top one is intrinsic pathway. Now, to identify any problems with the extrinsic pathway, we will go with prothrombin time. Prothrombin time test. This prothrombin time test will give us an idea or the status of extrinsic pathway clotting factors. If there is any deficiency, if any clotting factor in the extrinsic pathway is deficient, then our prothrombin time will increase. Increased prothrombin time indicates a problem with extrinsic pathway of clotting mechanism. Whereas intrinsic pathway can be studied with the help of APTT, activated partial thromboplastin time. Okay, this is another lab test. Okay, APTT is another lab test. Prolonged or increased APTT test indicates a problem with the intrinsic pathway of the coagulation pathway. So intrinsic pathway disorders can be detected by APTT. Extrinsic pathway disorders can be detected by PT. PT stands for prothrombin time, whereas APTT stands for activated partial thromboplastin time. Okay, so APTT will give us the status of intrinsic pathway, whereas PT will give us the status of extrinsic pathway. Okay, so now let us discuss about what are these individual lab tests. Okay, so now you got some basic idea that bleeding time. So I'm summarizing all things here. Here I'm summarizing. So if there is any problem with platelets, okay, platelet problems disorders can be detected by bleeding time. We can detect platelet problems by bleeding time, and also we can detect by platelet function tests. By platelet function tests. Platelet function tests. So we have various types of platelet function tests. Okay, attachment, all those things. Then clotting, coagulation problems. Okay, coagulation problems We know that we have two pathways in I can say three pathways. Okay, I will show you how the three pathways. So we have extrinsic pathway, we have extrinsic pathway. Okay, then we have intrinsic pathway, then we have intrinsic pathway, then we have common pathway, we have common pathway. Okay, so any problems? One second, I'm getting some message. Any issues here? Okay, no issues. Now, in extrinsic pathway disorders can be detected by prothrombin time. Extrinsic pathway disorders can be detected by prothrombin time, whereas intrinsic pathway disorders can be detected by activated partial thromboplastin time, APTT. Then common pathway disorders can be detected by thrombin time, thrombin generation test. So with the actually thrombin time will detect about conversion of prothrombin to thrombin. Okay, whereas TGT, thrombin generation test, will detect problems with conversion of thrombin to conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin. Fibrinogen conversion to fibrin will be detected by TGT. Okay, so these are the tests we will do in bleeding profile. In bleeding profile, we will go with a basic. Here I need to write clotting time also. Okay, so we will go with all these tests. We will go with the bleeding time, then clotting time, prothrombin time, activator partial thromboplastin time, thrombin time, thrombin generation test. Okay, so thrombin generation test will identify any errors with problem of conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin, whereas thrombin time will identify the problems with prothrombin to thrombin, whereas activator partial thromboplastin time will determine the defects in the intrinsic pathway of coagulation mechanism, whereas the prothrombin time will identify the problems within the extrinsic pathway of the coagulation mechanism. So these are the 6 bleeding profile test we will do in the labs. Now let us discuss about individual bleeding profile test. What is the significance of prothrombin time, significance of activator partial thromboplastin, thrombin time, and thrombin generation test, and their normal values. Okay, so now let us discuss about individual coagulation pathway tests. So I will take my PPT. One second, let me go to my PPT. My PDF, sorry. Yeah. So this is the coagulation pathways. So I took some material from internet. So yeah, so first we need to know what is hemostasis. One second. So as I stated, you already know what is hemostasis. Hemostasis is a mechanism of prevention of bleeding in the body that can be stated as a hemostasis. So the purpose of hemostasis is to ensure coagulation mechanism activate. This hemostasis will get activated whenever there is a blood cut. Okay, so that is all. So there are 3 important steps in hemostasis: the primary, vasoconstriction, coagulation, and fibrinolysis. So now we know the role of platelets. Platelets involves in prevention of bleeding. Then now I stated right in the diagrams, platelets, collagen will be exposed to collagens. Okay, now endothelial cells will release 1 Willebrand factor. To this 1 Willebrand factor, our platelet will get attached. Okay, attachment of platelet to collagen fiber only happens in the presence of 1 Willebrand factor. So this attachment is facilitated by a platelet receptor called GP1B. Absence of this GP1B receptor can also result in a bleeding disorder. Okay, that is another type of platelet dysfunction test. Okay, then after getting attached, now this attached platelets will get activated, and now this attached platelet will release certain cytokines, resulting in aggregation of many other platelets. So any 2 platelets will couple together. They will bind together by another receptor called GP2B3A. So with the help of GP2B3A, any 2 platelets will get attached, whereas with the help of GP1B, a platelet attachment will happen. So attachment is favored by GP1B, whereas aggregation is favored by GP2B3A. Okay, after aggregation, now the platelets will get activated. Activated platelets will start converting fibrinogen to fibrin. Okay, so platelet plug formation happen. After platelet plug formation, we got all these things. Okay, I'm just going forward. Now coagulation cascade. So in the coagulation pathway, the starting will be conversion of there are three important steps in coagulation pathway. First, formation of prothrombin activator. After formation of prothrombin activator, we have conversion of prothrombin to thrombin and fibrinogen to fibrin. So these are the three important steps in coagulation pathway. These are the all threading clotting factors, and this is intrinsic and this is extrinsic and the common pathways. Okay, so intrinsic pathway, as I stated, it will start with 12, 11, 9, 10. Okay, in between there is a factor 5 and factor 8 involvement. Okay, now they made the prothrombin activator. In the extrinsic pathway, it will direct step seventh clotting factor. It will get activated. It will convert tissue factor 10 to 10A. Okay, so 10A is the prothrombin activator. Prothrombin activator in the presence of fifth clotting factor, it will convert fibrinogen to prothrombin to thrombin. Thrombin will be converted to fibrinogen to fibrin. Now, intrinsic pathway, in order to detect any problems with this intrinsic pathway, then we will go with the lab test, which is, what is intrinsic pathway test? Aptt. Okay, activated partial thromboplastin time will discuss about intrinsic pathway disorders, whereas extrinsic pathway disorders will be discussed by PT, prothrombin time. Okay, so yeah, so this is the coagulation pathway. Then mechanism, bleeding disorders we already know. So now I will go to this one. Yeah, so now I'm going to discuss individual bleeding profiles. Okay, so yeah, the first one is prothrombin time. Okay, prothrombin time, as I stated, it is the test for detection of extrinsic pathway activity. So extrinsic pathway disorders can be detected by prothrombin time. Okay, so extrinsic pathway, what are there in extrinsic pathway? We have factor 7, 10 to 1. 7, 10 to 1 problems will be seen in. This PPT made a mistake, I guess. 1 second. Let me see. 2791. 2791. Okay. Okay. 1 second. Let me. I want to tell one more important thing. I forgot to tell. I forgot. Now, students, now I need to tell you many things again. I will show one more thing, students. Here I will draw a T shape. See the T here, like this. Okay, in this T, can you see what factors are there? Factors 7, 9, 10, and 2. Okay, these 4 factors can only get activated in the presence of vitamin K. They can only get activated in the presence of vitamin K. Absence of vitamin K results in inactivation of these factors. Because of inactivation, the blood won't clot. Okay, that is why vitamin K plays a vital role in the activation of these 4 clotting factors. What are those clotting factors? 7, 9, 10, and 2. Okay, so that is why these 4 are also called as vitamin K dependent clotting factors. Vitamin K dependent clotting factors. Okay, so now if a patient has any clotting problems, ischemic heart attack. So the patient heart has some blood has been clotted in the heart. So patient got ischemic heart attack. In such cases, we need to keep the patient in anticoagulant therapy. We don't want his blood to clot. There might be some situations where we won't allow the blood to clot. Okay, because if there is excessive clotting, then there is a chance of heart attack, heart death. Okay, the patient may die. At that time, what we will do is we will keep the patient. This is patient. Okay, we will give this patient warfarin. We will keep the patient in warfarin therapy. So what is the role of this warfarin? Warfarin is also called as oral anticoagulant. Okay, this warfarin will suppress vitamin K activity. Warfarin will eat all the vitamin K in the blood. If vitamin K eaten, without vitamin K, these factors cannot get activated. Okay, so here the patient's blood won't clot. So that is why in case of heart attack patients, we will keep the patient in warfarin therapy. Or we can also do one more thing. Platelets are binding here, right? This platelet binding can be inhibited with aspirin. With the help of aspirin tablets, we can able to temporarily block the temporarily prevent clotting of blood. That is why my personal suggestion to you, if any one of your family members experience a sudden heart attack, better give them 3 to 4 aspirin tablets. By giving aspirin tablets, we are reducing further clotting of blood in the body. Definitely, the heart attack is due to some blood clottage in the heart. So we don't want further blood clot in the body. So the best thing we can do is aspirin tablets present everywhere. They are painkillers usually. So by keeping 2 to 3 tablets to aspirin tablets to the heart attack patient, it's a safe only. Aspirin tablets will temporarily inhibit the clotting mechanism. Okay. So yeah, this is the importance of vitamin K. Okay, vitamin K dependent clotting factors are there, such as 7, 10, 9, and 2. Okay, they will be studied. Now let me go to this notes. Yeah. So extrinsic pathway. So prothrombin time is for extrinsic pathway activity. Most importantly, this prothrombin time will see vitamin K dependent factors. So what are the vitamin K dependent factors? 7, 9, 10, and 2, as we seen in the T shape. Okay, 7, 9, 10, and 2 factors are vitamin K dependent. So what we will do here, we will take thromboplastin and we will add calcium to plasma. Then we will get clotting time. So the normal prothrombin time is around 12 to 14 seconds. So this is the normal prothrombin time. Okay. So there is some international standardized timing, which is 0.8 to 1.2 seconds. So this is all about prothrombin time. Then we can go to next one. So the importance of prothrombin time is it monitors coagulation therapy or warfarin therapy. Okay, coagulation or warfarin can be used for vitamin K suppression. So the effectiveness of warfarin therapy in the patient can be assessed with the help of this prothrombin time. Okay, so this is all about the prothrombin time. Then coming to the activated partial thromboplastin time. So activated partial thromboplastin time is very essential for detection of any errors in the intrinsic pathway of the coagulation mechanism. So any problems or any defects in the intrinsic pathway can be detected with the help of this activated partial thromboplastin time. Okay, so but it won't give the results of factor 8 and factor 7 and factor 8, the factor 13 that we will see later. Okay, factor 7 and factor 13 we have another test, TT. Okay, the thrombin time, there we will discuss. So the normal activated partial thromboplastin timing is 25 to 35 seconds. It monitors heparin and screen for hemophilia. So hemophilia can be detected by activated partial thromboplastin time. Okay, so prolonged activated partial thromboplastin time indicates a problems with the heparin, thrombin inhibitors, fibrin degradation products in the blood. For this, the test will be citrate plasma. You will take citrate plasma, surface activators plus phospholipids. Okay, yeah. Then we have activated clotting time. So activated clotting time will monitor heparin anticoagulation or cardiac and vascular surgeries. Okay, the normal activated clotting time will be 90 to 120 seconds. Activated clotting time is normal clotting time only in the presence of calcium. Okay, simple. Then thrombin clotting time, thrombin generation test. So thrombin generation test, it will detect any problems with the fibrinogen. If there are any problems with the fibrinogen, those fibrinogen abnormalities can be detected with thrombin clotting time. Okay, prolonged thrombin clotting time can be seen in heparin disorders and thrombin inhibitor disorders. Okay, so this is all about the thrombin clotting time. Then a what is it? Elastography. Okay, this is called clot retraction test, students. The clot retraction test is a part of platelet dysfunction. This we can discuss in the platelet dysfunction test. Okay. Clot retraction we will see later. So this is the clot retraction test. We will see later. Bleeding time. So bleeding time you already know. So bleeding time will give us the functional status of the platelets in the body. So whenever there is any problem with the platelets or their count or in their functions, that definitely reflects in the bleeding time. Increased bleeding time indicates platelet dysfunctions. Okay. So then we have platelet function tests. So we have many types of platelet function test that we will see in the next class. Okay. So I guess your class time is over. Thank you very much, students. We will meet again. Maybe I can take this class again on the offline mode. Okay. I know that bleeding profiles are somewhat depth. Okay. Maybe tomorrow I will take a summary class of this coagulation disorders. Then we can go to the next unit. So thank you very much, students. I'm finishing this class.